So, thank you everyone for joining us currently. We are definitely looking forward to day two of this wonderful conference. So, without further ado, today we're going to be talking about like the session on health sovereignty and food sovereignty in the time of COVID-19. We're sharing community perspectives. I'd like to introduce our speakers, Asifa Kamal, Rover Jonson, and Shirley Duchesne, along with special guest Carrie Spence, who is going to be leading off with a prayer. So thank you, and I'm just gonna pass it on.
I would like to invite Carrie Spence to begin our session with a prayer.
Okay. Bonjour, everyone. I'm Carrie Spence. I first would like to pray to the Creator to help me to speak from the heart. We're on this call, and I pray that we are able to use our strengths and gifts to share a message with people possibly across the world, it being an international gathering, and also to share messages that need to be heard by other people that we might not necessarily think of when we were creating our presentations. And yeah, I just, short and sweet, but just pray that everyone stays healthy and well also.
All right, Megwe Carrie. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel. I'm very fortunate to be part of this international gathering today, and particularly in this panel today with some of my very favorite people. I am an assistant professor at the University College of the North with the Aboriginal and Northern Studies program. Before I begin, I would like to do my land acknowledgement, and I am going to invite you all to do your land acknowledgement in the chat box if you wish. I am connecting with you all today from Winnipeg, Manitoba, from the Treaty 1 territory, which is the ancestral land of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And I would also like to acknowledge that the water that we use in Winnipeg comes from Shoal Lake First Nation. So our panel that you're part of today is about acknowledging the strength of Indigenous communities in Manitoba and across Canada, particularly in the time of COVID-19. I believe gaining insights from the community narratives and stories is very essential to understand the worth of eco-cultural relationship and how that inspires any individual and the community to grow beyond stress and crisis. Our panel is titled as Health Sovereignty and Food Sovereignty in the Time of COVID-19, Sharing Community Perspectives. So the presenters are going to share some amazing stories of strength and some great examples. In our panel today, we have some really great people. The first speaker is Rover Jonson, an undergrad student from the University College of the North, and he has some amazing strength that he's going to share himself as well. We also have esteemed Chief Shirley Duchesne from all the way from Opiponapi Cree Nation. Thank you, Chief Duchesne, for joining us today. We have Carrie Spence, an esteemed member of Northern Manitoba Food, Culture, and Community Collaborative. And that is a philanthropy organization based in Manitoba and has been working with remote Northern and Manitoba communities, First Nation communities for quite a few years now. So without further delay, I would like to open the floor for Rover Jonson and invite him to share his stories. Over to you, Rover. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kamal. Thank you, everyone, for having me here today. As Dr. Kamal said, we're celebrating the strengths and the resilience, but I also want to acknowledge some of the crises that are going on in some of the communities right now. You may or may not have heard that Shamattawa has declared a state of emergency regarding suicides. There's a lot of fires going on. our communities often take the worst hit. And so I want to acknowledge that. And though my specific story or my specific piece is about a strength-based approach, in no way, shape, or form should it be used or is intended to mitigate the severity of the pandemic. So that said, my teachings are, when a crisis occurs or when something happens and we gain some kind of knowledge, that we are to use it as a roadmap for other people, specifically those behind us. So before we start, I'm going to introduce myself and locate myself in my research. A lot of Indigenous scholars before me and minds before me have done this and do this. And so with respect to that, I'll do that. My name is River Jonson. I'm from Treaty 1 territory, and I live and work in Treaty 5 territory. I moved to Thompson in 2019 as suicide relief for Two-Spirit youth. I am Two-Spirit myself. I'm also what the Western world calls transgender, though I don't personally use that term for myself. I use Two-Spirit specifically. And like I said, I am Métis and Michif. My ancestors settled in St. Andrews, Manitoba. And why this is really important for me, other than you need to know who I am, is a lot of this has informed my worldview. I grew up with my culture. I was very blessed. We didn't know that we were Indigenous until later. I often joke that I didn't have any non-Indigenous friends until my later years. And so I didn't know there was any other way. My mom, who is non-Indigenous, also went to great lengths to make sure that I grew up knowing that I was Michif, that I was a Métis person. There was a brief fracture in my teenage years in which my culture and I were separated. That said, ultimately, Indigenous ceremonies have brought me back home, and I have not stopped since. So I'm going to screen share with you right now. All right, everyone can see that? Okay, perfect. So this specific piece is about transformative trauma and kind of turning pain into medicine, or the discomfort of going through a global pandemic, and how we can make meaning of it in our personal lives. And so I'm not going to go over the details of how the pandemic has changed. We're all going through it. I don't need to go over those details, but one thing I do want to note is that it has changed the way that we've responded, for better or worse, not just to the world, but to one another, and of course to ourselves. And so for me, like I said, ceremony informs everything that I do. And so when this project started off initially as an assignment, however, I have been invested in it, very invested in it, specifically because of my own experience. And so I started doing some research and comparing, one, my own worldview as an Indigenous person who attends ceremony, but two, also Western perspectives of transformative trauma. What's quite interesting is that a lot of Western academics have actually noted that transformative trauma is characteristic of a rite of passage in Indigenous paradigms. And so when I'd done the research, I'd actually found that they actually segmented the rite of passage in 3 different stages. And so there was the preliminal, or the separation, so the isolation, the liminal, a time of confusion where you're kind of, everything that you knew to be normal fractures and shatters, and something new comes of it, but not before a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, and essentially your ties to what you've known become severed. And then, of course, once you've moved through that, there's a return to community, and you come back with a new identity and a new sense of self, and new insights as well into the universe. And so Indigenous perspectives of ceremony in terms of rites of passage. And so there are tons of scholars, Indigenous scholars before me. Willie Ermine is one that I want to note. I love his work in Southern Door. He talks a lot about this and about inner exploration being the most important journey in your life. But also I want to share my own experience. I'm a sun dancer, and I have been going to ceremony, like I said, for at least half of my life. And so when we started going through the pandemic, I likened it very quickly. It felt very quickly to how it felt when I was sun dancing specifically. So there's the sacrifice of the physical comforts that happened, as well as an exposure to different elements. The comforts of home was a big one. And then, of course, flesh offering or piercing as well. In terms of the mental comfort, especially my first year, I didn't fully know what I was getting into, or what I was receiving rather than getting into, but so the mental comforts were gone, as well as any distractions. What was very important to note for me was that through Sundance, my entire focus had to go towards the nest and focusing on the nest. And anytime I deviated from that, I actually felt myself in mental anguish. And then, of course, one of the biggest sacrifices for me as a sun dancer is the emotional comfort of my loved ones, specifically because I do Sundance on the men's side. And so any of the women in my life were extra out of reach for me during that time. And all of this, of course, as you may or may not know, was for spiritual enlightenment, but also to draw closer to myself and closer to my creator through the ancestral plane. And so how this research came to be, it always starts with self. It always starts with self, right? It's always subjective. And so this is kind of what my personal isolation or my liminal experience, my confusion was. And so when I went into the pandemic, I was actually a female. My name was Stephanie Jennifer Courtney Jonson. This is a postcard that my mom had created for me. And so when I went through the pandemic, or when I went into the pandemic, I went in female. I had no intention of being another person, but I went in, and I'll go a little bit further in the next slide, but I went in and because of any lack of distraction, lack of comfort, lack of travel, lack of being able to do anything that I was used to doing, the only thing I could control was spending time with my creator, spending time with myself, and finding out exactly who it is and what it is that makes me happy. What is my truth? And so today, my name is River Petapan Jonson. I'm a two-spirit male, and I'm medically transitioning right now from female to male. I'm just under a year on testosterone, and I've taken to fully claiming that identity. And so, like I said, so the photo on the left was me just before the pandemic, and the photo on the right was last month. It's May last month. And so, like I said, I couldn't run from myself. I had to sit still. I didn't have distractions. I also went into this as a single person with no children. And so there was no real influence in terms of what it was my truth was. And so I remember the day that I fully remembered who I was and who I was meant to be was very emotional for me. It was incredibly emotional for me. Transitioning is not something that I would have chosen for my life. However, I have lived with the thought of suicide for 20 years. And as soon as I realized that I could transition and could fully and authentically be myself in the world and be represented, that thought of suicide or that relationship was completely severed. And so it has restored my whole health in every single way. And because I believed in myself, I decided to pursue my undergrad. I felt if I could accept myself for who I am, then I could also pursue academia, which was something that I was afraid of before. In terms of my heart being restored, it allowed me to forgive everyone, forgive myself, forgive my parents, forgive any of the hurt that was ever caused. I suddenly didn't feel like life was wronging me because I could accurately be reflected in the world for who I truly was. And of course, because I was comfortable in my skin, now with physically transitioning, I did make a commitment to physical fitness and proper nutrition as well, which are an opportunity. I want to make that clear. That's opportunity, right? I recognize that not a lot of people or not everyone has the same opportunity as me. So are we in ceremony in this pandemic? And so you'll see on the top, I've compared the pandemic responses to some of the ceremonial rites of passage or initiations. So on the top, there's isolation and social distancing. And then on the bottom with the rite of passage, the separation from community, from familiarity, and from any perceived safety or security. These new spaces become unfamiliar and in some ways can even feel threatening. In the second stage, Sitting with self, it's unknown, and quite literally we're being stripped of all of our comforts. And again, with ceremonial rite of passage, there's almost a spiritual death of sorts, and I say that loosely, because my teachings are that their death is a new beginning, and again, following with rebirth. And of course, a profound spiritual crisis or insights can then be received because we are severed, or because I have been severed from any of my earthly ties in that moment. And again, in the third pandemic response, there's a shift in perspective and priorities. New truths have come, and as you all know, the innovation that has come from pandemic responses is amazing. Right now, we're sitting with each other internationally because of technology. And again, ceremonial rites of passage, we come back with a deeper connection to community and understanding ourselves in relation to the greater society. And so in terms of the research methodology, I won't spend too much time on here because I want to be cognizant of time and the other speakers. I did conduct interviews in whatever means most comfortable with other people. I referred to each individual as knowledge carriers, as they were gifting me with knowledge, their experiences, and I did have a elder, or a that I've identified as an elder, and a knowledge keeper as well. Each individual, so there was 4 females, 3 were working professionals, 1 knowledge keeper. They varied in ages as well as their stages of life. They also varied in terms of their locations across Manitoba. All have agreed and would love to have their names included in this work. 1 remained anonymous, but I still used her information with her permission. And so the knowledge carriers, the 3 that I want to introduce, so the first one is anonymous. The second one is Adeline Bird, who is from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and she comes from, or she belongs to rather, Rolling River. That's her community. And then with Destiny, she's a 2-spirit, she identified as a 2-spirit wife, creator, and doula. What's important to note is that the way that each of these individuals that they'll be identified throughout this presentation, they have chosen and stated that this is who they are, and I've remained, that's intact. And so here are some of the experiences. Oh, and again, Christine Sawatsky, who comes from Nelson House. My Cree is not very well yet, so I will spare myself the embarrassment there, but she comes from NCN. And so with her, what was interesting, she had said, and she kept referring to the virus as a tiny microscopic teacher, and that the microscopic teacher has forced us, for better or worse, to get into ceremony with ourselves, so we can't fight it anymore. And so with the first individual, what's quite interesting, so I have had, what I also want to say is that I have had a connection, or have a connection to each of these individuals prior to the research as well as afterwards. And so with this individual, she is was a self-proclaimed bachelorette. In all the years that I've known her, she had no intention of ever getting married, having children. She was quite content with her social life. She's very extroverted, and that's just the way that her life was. What's interesting about her is that as she went into the pandemic, she started a new relationship. God bless her for that. And so when we were speaking, she had actually said to me, and so now who she is she's a family woman. She's currently trying to get pregnant, her and her partner. She said, because of the pandemic, we saved a lot of money. We were able to buy a house, and now her dreams with her partner and building her family has become of the utmost importance to her throughout the pandemic. Second person, Adeline Bird. Again, I want to note, so with the next participants, or the next knowledge carriers, each one, so all 4 are Indigenous. The next 3 all have a very healthy relationship with spirit, and are very rooted in their cultures in their respective ways. And so with Adeline, she's Afro-Anishinaabe author, broadcaster, and entrepreneur, who again belongs to Rolling River First Nation. And what's interesting about Adeline, she had shared a prophecy with me that she'd overheard from her father when she was a little girl, wherein he said, when Black and Indigenous lives are free, then the gates of heaven will open. And she juxtaposed this to the murder of George Floyd from last year, because, you know, and like Adeline had said, the world was home. They were at home when George Floyd was murdered. Everyone had their cell phones, you know, for those of us that have that, had their cell phones, that had the internet. And so George Floyd's murder touched everybody globally in a way that maybe we wouldn't have seen had we been at work at our 9-to-5 jobs in an office. And so she actually, like I said, compared that prophecy to a collective shift that is happening. And then with Destiny actually was hospitalized and unconscious because of COVID. And I spoke to her before the hospitalization. She'd always had a strong faith, and she draws on Christianity in addition to traditional ways. And so I spoke to her before her hospitalization. We spoke about God, about the spirit realm, and about trusting that process. And so when Destiny came back after 14 days of being unconscious, she had said she's never felt so much gratitude for life ever, and that her relationship with her higher power, with Creator, is so much stronger. Especially her relationship, not just with Creator, but her relationship with herself, with her greater community, and most importantly with the land. And Destiny's home community is Fisher River. And so some of the parts, pardon me, of their separation, each one of them had said, you know, like with the first individual, she said, everything that I love is being taken from me. I'm being stripped of my identity, which is what I said in the beginning, that those old ties are being severed, right? And then with Adeline, she had been waiting for this shift since she was a little girl, and said, it was quite funny. She said, well, everyone else bought toilet paper. I bought all of the best comforts, the best sheets, because I knew that in some way this was a celebration, because the old system was dying and something new was coming. And again, with Destiny, I'd mentioned her faith as well. And so in terms of their liminal experience, like I said, with the first individual, she said it was just me and my partner, and our relationship and our future was all I could control. With Adeline, she had said we're all at home and we're all paying attention to things in the world, crises that we always had, realities that we'd always had. And with Destiny, she said my perspective had completely shifted, and everything that was important to me is different now. What's truly important has come into focus because of her near-death experience with the pandemic. And again, I'm just reiterating some of what we've just discussed as well. And so in terms of the group reflections of a collective transformation, these are some of the messages that each individual has shared with me that I'd like to share with you. With our first individual, they'd said now's the time to do everything that we'd wanted to do. Again, with respect to protocols, but to do those things that we wanted to do, like in my case, truly become who it is that I am. With Adeline, what are we going to do with this time? We're in the pandemic, for better or worse. What are we going to do with this time? Are we going to make it count for something for those of us that are blessed with our basic needs being met? And again, with Destiny, we only have this one life. Are we going to show up for it? And so, and in closing, I will end with a closing from Christine, again, who was my elder throughout this process. She was very clear to state that the pandemic is an intervention, because we're so outside of ourselves and not paying attention to that inner space that something did have to intervene. And through that intervention, a transformation of self can occur, and then a rebirth in which we can serve our communities in a better way. And so in closing, I just want to thank you again for allowing me to share this space with you, and to share this knowledge with you, and to share the stories of everyone else. And this quote seemed quite fitting, but your isolation must not be mechanical, but spiritual. That is, it must be elevation. Like I said, for me, for better or worse, we are in this pandemic, and I have every intention of leaving this pandemic a better person. Iko se.
Thank you so much, River. It was so beautiful to hear the stories, and again, remind ourselves that spiritual transformation, mental strength is out there. We just have to hold on to it and remind ourselves again and again when we are in crisis. And this pandemic is going on for almost close to 2 years now. So we have to repeatedly kind of identify the strengths. So our next presenter is going to be Chief Shirley Ducharme, who is presenting from Opiponapian Cree Nation, a community located in northern Manitoba. I will be co-presenting with Chief Ducharme as needed. Before we move to the other presentation, I wanted to say that we will have room for question and answer at the end of the presentation today. But if you also have questions beyond our presentation, when you would like to connect with any of our presenters, please feel free to connect with me. So Shirley, over to you. You can introduce yourself while I start the screen sharing.
Hello, everyone. Ducharme and present Chief of Opikonapian Cree Nation, South Indian Lake, Manitoba. And my background is South Indian. South Indian Lake is my hometown, and lived here for all my life, and have the education background, retired as a teacher, and now took on the leadership for our community. And I have a family across Manitoba, in different regions of Manitoba, and grandchildren. So I am really, honored today to be a part of this international presentation on health sovereignty and food sovereignty in time of COVID. Because I know it was already stated that, this is very difficult time and really unexpected times for us right now to be able to, do what we can for our people, to be able to stand together right across Manitoba, across Canada, and across the world. We are all fighting this pandemic. And I think, through this all, we have learned a lot, and seeing our nation and how things are, becoming hopefully to be normalized again. I think, it is critical to kind of come together and be able to share our own experiences within our own First Nations.
Thank you, Shirley. Can you see the screen okay?
Yes, I can see it. Thank you.
Okay. I will begin with just one slide, just very quickly sharing some of the views that I gathered from the communities on Indigenous strength-based approach. The framework that you see on the left is kind of a very general concept of strength-based approach. Of course, the individual communities have their own framework and outline of strength, and that is envisioned through the language and the culture. This is kind of all the gist and summary of what I gathered by talking to South Indian Lake and elders of South Indian Lake and Chief Shirley Ducharme. Is one for sure is the identification of strength is really important when you are in a journey of overcoming a crisis. Nurturing of strength is something that's so important. When you identify your strength, you have to make sure it's going stronger, and then you acknowledge the change and the experience that you're going through in a very meaningful way, whether it's a land-based activity or something. The opportunity that comes towards you along with the meaningful experiences, and then envisioning a future with the newly gained strength. So this was kind of a ongoing growth and a journey that kind of I understood by hearing stories from Chief Ducharme. So from my understanding, the Indigenous strength-based approach became a way of thinking that encourages individual and communities to nurture their strength that are founded in emotion and eco-cultural relationship and the execution of those relationships in a meaningful way. It is culture sensitive, it is locally rooted, and embedded within the decolonizing and social justice framework. That's why I think in many of the academic and health literature nowadays, Indigenous strength-based approach is being applied. But more than all these academic literatures, what always has stuck inside me is a quote from our late elder Vivian Moose. I want to acknowledge her. I always acknowledge her in all of my work. My mentor from Opiponapian Cree Nation. She told me that all you need is a vision and a name in Cree in order to be strong, in order to start a program at the community level, in order to move forward. So the language and the culture and the vision that starts from your heart is key to Indigenous strength-based approach, whether people are doing it individually or collectively. So that said, it's going to be Chief Ducharme from here on. Over to you, Shirley.
Okay, just moving on, just to share a little bit about our community. It is Opiponapian Cree Nation and Treaty 5 territory. Our population is about just a little over 1,074. And out of that numbers, there's about 676 adults, and the remaining are children under age 18. So we have, quite also like it is Métis and non-treaty. The majority is the treaty population here. And we have our community history is like we were a part of Nelson House and Sitawasi Cree Nation. That's where our people were original treaty, had their treaty rights. And then we are located at Southern Indian Lake, and the location started way back in history with our great grandfathers, because this is this Churchill River, Southern Indian Lake was rich and abundance of resources that our people kind of separated from Nelson House and started living in South Indian Lake and remained there. And later on in 2005, we were recognized as a band. So now we are our own independent Opiponapian band, Opiponapian Cree Nation band. And that's just a little bit about history of South India. But in the years of 1974, there was a great impact in of our community when Manitoba Hydro developed building the dam and diverting our river flow. And with that, with the power that is required for Manitoba's and also power sales to the United States. I know that it had great impacts, and we are still living through the impacts of our flood. But we are very resilient. We're thriving people, but it's pretty sad to this day that we are living with this disaster. But anyway, we are very remote, and there is road access. There's a short ferry right across the channel, and we're connected to gravel road to our nearby communities, Lynn Lake, City Rapids, and Thompson. And we have a good health facility, but very small. One of the things that is still ongoing is very inadequate housing in our First Nations, just like all First Nations. And also the inadequate educational facilities that we have. We only have a school that goes up to grade 10. So we miss the grades 11 and 12, in which our students have to leave our community and find home placements or go to Cranberry Portage. The majority of them go there for the residential setting there. And one of our biggest, I guess, is the lack of running water in our community. There's still a number of houses that don't have running water. Right now, we only have the septic tanks potable water delivery and so on. So there is no good running water facilities happening in our community still to this day. And we only have one community store, Northwest Company Northern Store, that we all rely on. Yeah, I need the next slide, Astia. Okay. Yeah, number of COVID-19 at our Opequanapian cremation. I'm just going to share a little bit. We have been very, fortunate that out of the population that I have given you, a total right now we have to date was 126, and I guess going on 2 months we have had no further cases. But we had 3 rounds of COVID here. Our first round was just maybe four individuals, and automatically they were in quarantine, and we were able to contain it very quickly. Second round, I think maybe a total of 18 or so. And the last round, we had a total of 108 or something. So a total to date, we only have 126 cases that we have experienced to date so far, and hoping that, with vaccines being available now, that, we have no further cases. But the greatest thing that's all impacted in our First Nation is we lost one elder, which I know our people dearly respect the elders. And it was a very great loss for the community to lose an elder through this COVID crisis. And throughout, it has been really emotional challenges right across the board with all our people, and especially our children. And I know that it's pretty, it was pretty tough to understand and be able to cope with the social distancing and reducing number of gatherings and different arrangements, especially with our different arrangements for our funeral, because we did lose a number of people, maybe about 6 or 7 throughout, and it wasn't all COVID related, but throughout these losses, it was very difficult, because this is not our normal way as we put our people to rest, and that greatly impacted great emotionally. And the biggest impact is social. We are sociable people all the time, socializing, and that was very, very difficult for us to be distancing and also being apart and not being able to gather and stuff like that. And I know that, like I did mention a little bit about our young people, with the it really impacts them, because you know how young children are. Yes, they like to be in a school setting where they have hang out with their friends and learn together as children. But at the time when we had our lockdown, I know that it was expected to have online learning, but in a remoteness of our North community, we don't have that bandwidth that we would very much love to have in our community, and that limited the online learning. So our kids really relied on homework packages, and in homes there is difficulty trying to teach your children. And I know it's a concern, it's a big loss, and educational wise, we're right across the board. Just a little bit of background on how we were able to, get our First Nation prepared and ready to be able to keep our members safe and healthy. early in the spring, when we knew that COVID cases were starting, and in the southern region, knew that we would be getting it also in the northern area. So we started planning early as getting established, getting a group pandemic response team together, and it really worked very well. We kind of looked at our leaders and all organizations to pull together, get a representative from each, and then create a team. And then the next step was, okay, looking at our infrastructure. We knew if there was a rise in our community, we had to have some facility, a location where we could, have a quarantine area. So we did what we could that was available to our First Nation. I know it was a struggle, and we had to close down our school because the school is our large facility. So that's where we were able to use that as a quarantine area. And also the one challenge that we had is, like I mentioned, that we only had one northern school, a grocery store. So we had to find alternate ways of providing for our community, so that everyone had food security. We did arrange for using our funding from Indigenous Service Canada. We were able to purchase extra food every month to get a shipment in, and then we prepare these food hampers and deliver them to the homes. And also earlier in the fall, they did we always do this because we had a program ready. To meet soon, and that's our food program, which Asifa will give a little bit more in-depth detail of how that originated and how it is an important supply to our community. But at that time, we did get in the fall to gather medicines, because our people rely on traditional medicines too, and then deliver the medicinal packages to the homes so that they'd have something to work with. And I think, with this COVID, that we found that it was very necessary. And we did also support our infants, because of high cost in formula, especially at this northern store. Or organizations like Jordan's Principles and Brighter Futures and other programs were able, through the health support that we got, we were able to also get cheaper cost in supplies to prepare for the home delivery program that we had established also.
I think you spoke a little bit about this in the past slide, Shirley. Your collaboration with NCN with the Thompson bus line.
Yeah, bringing more into the community.
Yeah, so shall I move on to the next slide?
Yes, is this where you're going on, or I'm still on? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. So I will jump in here just for a few minutes. I have been working with Opiponapin Cree Nation for the past 12 years, and past 2 years while I was working with the Northern Manitoba Food Culture and Community Collaborative as well. We were in touch with the community of OPCN and were informed about all the amazing activities they have been doing as part of their community readiness. So what I learned from the community is they have formed very timely in October 2019 a program called Community Wellness Jurisdiction Initiative Program, and it's a program with an objective to strengthen the safety and well-being of the community children and the families, and collect funding and fund the culturally appropriate prevention and protection services. The funding stream is focusing on the prevention of activities to help families at risk to stay together in the time of COVID. And the outcome focus is on safe and healthy children and families, and addressing the child and family needs as priority. So when it was formed in 2019, right before COVID, it was actually a good thing that happened for the community members. So they jumped into their plan of action to help people out. So at the very initial stage of COVID, when other communities were trying to also outline their actions, I would say OPCN was very ready to provide their support throughout the community, and they were sending care packages to every household. They were working together with the health and the health complex and the school, and in the community-based food program called the Eating to Meet Swing program. Actually, a very exciting part of their activities was planning every month some activities, land-based activities such as snow sculpting, survival training, bannock baking on the open fire, family cookout, ice fishing, and you get to see some of the beautiful pictures of those in a few minutes. So a little bit of focus on Eating to Meet Swing program. It's a community-based food program in Opiponapin Cree Nation, established in 2012-13, and in the time of pandemic, because it is an intergenerational food program where the adults and the elders come forward to teach the youth on land-based activities, harvesting, hunting, fishing, trapping, and sharing the food with the communities. This time of the COVID, they inspired fishing trips from May to September. There was a moose hunting program in the summer and the fall, harvesting land-based medicines and sharing the medicine with the community elders in the fall of 2020. That's something that Chief Ducharme was also mentioning earlier. We don't have a lot of the pictures of the activities and harvesting food, but these are generally, like this is what they do generally. These are pictures from their activities prior to COVID-19. So you can see how happy and vibrant people are when they're close to the land and do all kinds of activities with their elders and families. And also I was informed of their amazing plan of action utilizing the external funding towards land-based activities and educational resources. So they received funding from Breakfast Club of Canada, which they spent towards the care packages that Chief Ducharme was mentioning. They also received another funding called Local Infrastructure Fund. That one they spent on buying new skidoo and bogan for the community and for the use of Eating to Meet Swing program. They also received Indigenous Peoples Resilience Fund in 2020, which is another funding available for during COVID. And that one they used for their fall hunting trips and hunting moose and sharing the moose meat with the community members. And then they have also received funding from Northern Manitoba Food Culture and Community Collaborative. Collaborative regularly funds the Eating to Meet Swing program and OPCN, but they kind of moved forward and supported additionally for buying land-based activity resources and also additional funding towards land-based activities as well. These are some of the photos very quickly. Ice fishing trips that was inspired by the community, and people were going family-wise. There were no two families going out together, so individual family from one household were going for each of the trip. This is for spring duck hunting. This is a swan, by the way. This is not a duck. I made a mistake last time, and so Chief Ducharme was kind of saying, but that's the swan, Asifa. And fried bannock and making tea. That's also, I think, in the spring of 2020. And there's a little bit of an ice fishing photo. That's So over to you, Chief, about COVID tests and vaccines.
Okay, so up to date now, our second round of COVID mass vaccine is coming up on May 25th to 26th. And at this time, they bring in the armed forces to assist us. First time around, it went very smoothly, very quick, because we don't have the capacity of nurses and staff to fully do the vaccine as quickly as possible. So we are grateful Red Cross has, supports coming into the community. And most of our elders, our health workers, our frontline workers, and some of the adult population were vaccinated on the first round. So the second round, these people will get their second dose, but also they will do the continue the adult population with the first dose of vaccines that the other group has not received. So that's where we are at, and of course there was some reluctancy with some of the members, but as we move forward, I know there's more and more that have filled out the consent forms, and that they are willing to take the vaccine. So that's good. That's good news. And with the 674 adult population I had mentioned, there was over at least a good number, 383, I want to say, of our adult population was vaccinated on the first round. So I'm hoping that we do reach more numbers on this second round of our vaccine clinic.
Okay. Would you like to speak on this one, Chief?
Yes, I think one of the I'll mention on some of the strengths that we notice. We have noticed in our First Nation is being prepared early, and our strong teamwork from all the organizations was really helped us get through. And also, like I said, even though that we lack infrastructure, we were able to do the accommodations. We had our Jordan's Principal building available, plus the because of our overcrowdedness, the homes, we had to have something where people could self-isolate away from home, so that if there was someone with COVID, we didn't want them to transmit the whole household and COVID, and that's how we were able to contain it. With the accessibility of these buildings, we were able to break away from the home, and that we had isolation quarters for the individuals. So that's why our numbers are were low, because we were able to do that right away. The other thing too during our lockdown is what greatly helped us in monitoring our community was we have the funding again was greatly very helpful to hire safety officers that did patrolling in our community and monitored, so everyone was within their household and just being at home during the lockdown. But I think one of the things that I really have to say that when you get the compliance and the members knowing what their job is, what they need to do to help overcome these cases, I think that's a great strength for the members, and I really acknowledge our people for doing that. When we really needed them to act, they were on board, and that was a great help. And our way, our traditional and culture ways, is something that, was really was brought out, because now, it's just like going back. You were back reuniting with your family, the close relations activities. I know it was, at that time it was getting too long, but some people wanted to just stay out and camp, and it was a little bit, risky to have all our a large number of our members out there, because coming back and forth into town, and people have to monitor and see how they're doing. So yeah, we did allow not too long, like maybe 2 weeks, if people wanted to camp out. And the way the activities were in households, the way we were organizing our department leads, organized, through Facebook or whatever media that they could use, they were able to initiate these activities to have that family-centered type of culture ways.
With that, I thank Chief Ducharme for this beautiful presentation. I'm going to end with this land-based activities photos, and that's all these amazing people from Opipanapi Cree Nation. Once again, we will have a question and answer at the end, and if we have time, and if we don't have time, I will be very happy to answer people's question. Please forward them to me. I'll request the organizers. And if you would like to connect with Chief Ducharme or River or Carrie, you'll be able to do that. I would like to invite Carrie Spence from Northern Manitoba Food, Culture and Community Collaborative to come and share her stories with us. Welcome, Carrie.
Thanks, Asifa. And just to confirm, we have until 4:30. I believe
Yes.
That's what the organizer said. Thank you for the introduction. I also want to acknowledge that Chief Shirley Ducharme is the special guest, not me. So I am a staff member of the Northern Manitoba Food, Culture and Community Collaborative. We are based in Winnipeg. And if anyone has any questions directly for me and the work that my team also does, we have contact information on our website, as well as even a Facebook message, I think would be okay. So I'm going to briefly, I'm not even going to go into every one of these, but basically I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Carrie Spence. I am First Nations, originally from Lake Manitoba First Nation. My mother grew up in the Métis community next door to it called Bogar. And I also want to acknowledge that I do have Métis ancestry. I don't do that often enough. I grew up in Eddystone, and I'm currently living in Winnipeg, and I've been here 15 years in August. And after hearing River's spiritual transformation presentation, I had to add, I am a daughter of my, and I had to add that I'm a child of Creator. And the reason I did that is because that is something that I've also done during this pandemic, is drawn closer to my higher power, which has led me to this job, to this work. And I'm so grateful of the people that I'm meeting and the work that I get to do. I also want to acknowledge, I'm a daughter of my father, and he is the reason why I studied nutrition and did all the training that I have, and that led me to here. And I feel that, he's passed on since 2008. And I feel like this work actually connects me or brings me closer to him, which I've just been realizing lately a little bit more. And I want to acknowledge that I am, I'm not sure if you could see my cursor here, but I am a helper in this food sovereignty movement. And I have been a post-secondary student for 10 years out of 15, but even though I'm not a technical, Western institution student, I am a lifelong student and learner and unlearner. I would like to get into what unlearning is, but for the sake of time, I will have to move on. So our collaborative works in relationship for healthier, stronger communities in Northern Manitoba. And who we are, we're a true collaboration of a number of people. We have Northern advisors, staff, funders, and community partners. So I want to acknowledge our Northern advisors, Becky Cook, Sophia in Poplar River, Marlon Cook, and also Hilda Dysart is from the same community as Chief Shirley Descharmes, and Carl McCorster. And also want to acknowledge and appreciate the Northern advisors that are no longer currently a Northern advisor, but definitely have provided guidance in our operations that have led us to what we do now and who we are as a collaborative. Monica Sinclair, Jim Beardy, Noel Allard, Irvin Biggity. These Northern advisors provide guidance in our operations, and they do a lot of work with us throughout the year, and it's been a pleasure working with them. Here are the beautiful women that I work with at the collaborative. 4 of us are based in Winnipeg, and Alexandria Moody is based in Nelson House. And actually, Amanda and Alexandria are tuning into this presentation. So I want to also acknowledge, we're all doing this work, and I want to acknowledge Amanda and Julie's direct support in this development of this presentation. I just feel really supported, and I hope that I do justice of what who we are, what we do, how we do it, and as well the work that's happening in communities that we've seen. We have our funders that we refer to lovingly as collaborators. They are more than just funders. They do significant work in the collaborative. Just to name one big commitment, they participate in granting committees. And we also have over 50 community partners. Community partners can be in multiple organizations in the same community, but I just wanted to show the progression from 2013. We had 3 partners. That was the first year that we ran the pilot, and now in 2021 we have over 40, and they're all over. See, these yellow dots show previous partnerships or projects that we were partnering with, and the blue is showing current. So how we do our work is, this is our theory of change that was regularly referred to in our work. It's something that was developed, and it took 4 years of development with the Northern advisors, our collaborators, and community partners to basically root our values of our work. You could see the 6 values in the purple surrounding it. This is uses an opportunities-based lens and embraces a circular worldview that aims to show our continuous growth and learning. And our values are reciprocity, shared learning, collaborative, relational, slow, and committed. And I would love to get into what the center is, but generally what is in the center are communities in Northern Manitoba, that they are stronger and healthier, and our partnerships are mutually transformative. And I would attest to myself that I've already felt like I've gone through so much growth and transformation just in this work that we do. And my favorite value, just to share a little bit about me, is the relational aspect, and I realize how important it is in every aspect of our lives. So here's what we do as collaborative members, not just staff, but everyone else as well. Granting, story sharing, north-to-north events, and self-representation. So Chief Shirley Descharmes being here speaking for her community of South Indian Lake is self-representation. That's something we truly believe in and support. And also immersive unlearning. I'm going to focus on granting for the sake of time. I could probably spend a whole hour sharing about these 4 points, but I will get into it. The granting process, we have an annual inquiries and proposal process that begins in October. For 2 months, we have an inquiries process where we're putting it out there that we're accepting grant applications, and we have a process that is community centered. And the eligible criteria, we have small grants, I should say, from 1,000 to 25,000 per grant. So what we're looking for specifically, and this was provided by Northern Advisors guidance, we look for projects that support culture, economic development, youth development, and help people have better access to food. And in that better access to food, more looking in the long-term food sovereignty lens. The project must be in northern Manitoba, and it must benefit a group of people and have a community behind it, and also community-led and support from many people in that community that shows buy-in. So our grants typically support, for example, horticulture, which includes gardening, greenhouses, hydroponics, just as a few examples, country foods or wild harvesting, livestock raising, such as chicken coops, beekeeping, and also we have planning grants for communities that would like to see whether something is going to be a good fit and have sustainability in their community. And then, of course, cultural activities. As you could tell, culture is in our organization name, and we generally like to have that cultural activity to have some sort of food component. So here's our 2020 regular cycle, which of course began in October 2019 when we were in Julie and Amanda were the staff at the time and accepting proposals and also receiving inquiries. So once the the process unfolded, there were 17 projects or grants that were approved by the collaborators and also Northern Advisor input in the amount of $255,000. And during 2020, there are also 6 emergent grants that came up outside of the regular cycle, totaling $98,000. So in these projects, when 2020 happened and the pandemic hit in March, there were adjustments made to some grants. So there were shifts from an original plan to a different plan. And just to give one example, in Churchill, there was a plan to support a snow goose hunt and have a community celebration. Of course, with COVID, that community celebration couldn't happen. You couldn't gather and have a lot of people going on this hunt together. So there was an adjustment made for multiple small workshops and the purchase of a snowmobile for hunting and land-based learning. And I'm not lead on the partnership with Churchill, but Amanda has shared with me that they were originally renting a snowmobile from community members. And when COVID hit, everyone was using theirs for personal hunts. So this just shows an importance of investing in infrastructure so that this can be a more sustainable project. So COVID relief, there's a shift now to provide COVID relief, and it began March 2020 until even today. So certain tasks of our staff, which was Julie and Amanda, were paused. Like, for example, community gatherings. Of course, that had to be paused because that was not a reality at the time. So the focus became stronger on community responses to COVID. The staff, Amanda and Julie, reached out to community partners to check in to see how how they were doing and asking how they were responding to what was happening. What they've heard was there was a lot of concerns around food, especially if the COVID virus reached the communities. And also many projects, they wanted to scale up their projects and they were getting support from leadership. So they shared this learning back with collaborators and also outside partners and developed this document that is very well summed up of the themes that were coming up in all those calls. It's called the What We Heard document. And collaborators were sharing with whoever they could this information as well. And the collaborative was getting calls from other organizations that were receiving funding from the government that was needed to reach the communities to provide relief. And from there, from sharing all this out, this What We Heard document, more funding was received. And in 2020, 31 grants were dispersed and deployed as quickly as possible, and then the amount of $301,000. And as you can remember, in 2020, the regular granting cycle was less than that, and now a brand new granting cycle was taking place and needing fast turnaround, basically, in order to have a greater impact to help the communities. There were no applications needed for this. This was very special circumstance. The collaborative had a solid foundation with collaborators and community partners, and we're able to connect quickly with the partners and also share back with the collaborators where they were able to leverage also extra funding. So here's the progression of grant deployment at our collaborative. You could see in 2013 was the pilot, showing the darker blue is how the number of applications that came in, and the lighter blue is showing the funded projects. What I want to focus on for this slide is that COVID response grants that came in 2020 that actually surpassed the regular grants, and 2021 as well. This year showed a need for a higher number of emergent granting funds, like grants that were dispersed outside of the regular cycles. Communities were, and this was because communities were ready to scale up or begin food systems work. So yeah, the staff also grew in 2020. Me and my coworker Nicole were hired in July, and also Alexandria was hired in November. So we were better able to help communities. I want to say that me and Nicole and Alex were so grateful to be able to assist Amanda and Julie in their work, because they were doing this on their own. And I just had to add that little tidbit that I'm like really grateful I was able to help them out and take some things off their plate. And we also were able to enable more grant writing support, some project planning, and also, of course, some story sharing. So in March 2022 today, 31 grants went out in the amount of $301,000. As I said, no application was needed. Quick decisions were needed to be made by the staff, and also a COVID committee of collaborators was assembled to help with like more difficult decisions, so it doesn't rely completely on staff. So quick funds were deployed due to, of course, existing partnerships, the building of trust, the trust that was already there. And also certain funds were slow in deployment due to not having qualified donee status, which is a whole other issue that I could have another hour-long conversation about. But basically, communities were having a difficult time accessing the funds, even though we had it at the collaborative and they were approved for a grant. So key supporters, and another reason was also key supporters were unavailable. Leadership and staff in the communities, of course, were addressing COVID-19 in ways that were completely necessary, and they might not have had the time to address these food sovereignty projects. So I just give a couple of quick examples before I move on. I'm looking at the time. 2020 COVID relief grants, here's just a couple examples. The expansion of gardening projects, for example, seeds. Shipping to the north is very expensive. One community requested to cover the cost of shipping. There was a couple that received staff wage support or subsidies. Family hampers and single household hampers. And as you know, we did mostly long-term food sovereignty grants, but this was, of course, shifting to short-term relief as well. Packages for students. Students were now that was becoming evident that there was food insecurity for students, so packages were sent home, and of course, food bank efforts. And the last one, not the last one, but like the other theme of these COVID relief grants was harvesting on the land activities. So I just want to show a little example here. In Camperville, we supported a trapper's license workshop, and many community members were there interested in getting their trapper's license for their, sustainable food system. And Colton was one of them. He's 10 years old, and I was rereading the notes from this workshop, and people were in tears getting their trapper's license. Like I would have been too. That's just something to really take pride in, and also to like practice and teach and pass on to the next generation. And also we have OPCN once again featured. There were family-focused hunting kits for families to go out on the land together and also to maintain connection, because as you know, COVID-19 brought a lot of disconnection. So that was really important. And there we had berry bushes where we dispersed 1,200 Saskatoon saplings to 6 or 7 communities, such as Peguis First Nation, Opaskwayak Cree Nation, Norway House. And I wanted to give one brief example. Unfortunately, I feel like we're really out of time, but one of the community partners that I am co-lead on is MCN. basically when the pandemic hit, leadership and departments in the community were realizing how much they're investing in this short-term food security efforts, you know, to keep people shopping in their communities so they don't travel the 4 hours to Winnipeg and potentially bring the virus back. They decided, we've always wanted this space, now's the time to do it. And the planning began in like around May. And we, as us as staff, more so Julie, helped facilitate those project planning meetings and bringing people together to establish a clear vision, and also, you know, source funding, which they're successful in. And I, not making this about me, but I assisted them in their Indigenous Peoples Resilience Fund, and they were able to buy equipment for the space specifically. As you can see, the shovels in the ground were in December 2020. Within a couple of weeks, it was completely erected. They still have the interior to do, but it's, I just want to say the community is very driven and they're very dedicated to the space, and everything's there within the community, except COVID is putting a halt to things. And they wanted to be here and present. First, it was a vaccine clinic that they were unsure when it was being scheduled, but there's a lot going on in MCN right now. So I want to acknowledge that they've given their blessing to me to share their story. It's been a true pleasure to like create connections with people, and it's all been on the phone, all on video chat, all on email. And I cannot wait to meet them. If it wasn't for COVID, I would have met all my community partners that I'm relationship lead on last year, at least probably twice. And this year I would have went once already. So I just wanted to say that I have, you know, a special place in my heart for MCN and the lands team and what they're doing. Key learnings, I think I'm just going to leave it there, but generally there's community readiness definitely to scale up projects, but also get started like MCN did. There's a lot of systemic barriers and racism in terms of access to funds and, you know, a lot of other areas as well. It's important to listen and center community priorities and knowledge. And I love that Amanda and Julie asked the communities, what will help you, and listened. And that's the part of the collaborative's work and what Northern Advisors have said, as opposed to, we're going to send money and you got to spend it this way. It was more, what do you need and what's going to help you? What's going to help those vulnerable populations, especially, and, you know, the funds were deployed. So I will leave it at that. We're already at 4:32. It's been an honor to share as a to represent the collaborative and the work, and a lot of the work that I wasn't even directly part of, but have been helping with in the last 10 months now.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I think you have done an amazing job of sharing something so meaningful. I think all our panelists have shared stories that came from the heart and very informative, very necessary at the time of pandemic. Because we are a little short in time, probably will not have time for question and answer. But that said, again, like, you will be able to connect with us through the organizer or even Google search us, so you'll find us. And Northern Manitoba Collaborative information is out there in their website with some beautiful photos and stories. So please, thank you for joining us, connect with us, and we look forward to our future story sharing events. And I thank the organizer and all the panelists and everyone in the audience for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good rest of the evening. Bye.
Yeah!